News now. The government has unveiled revised plans to build 2 new towns with 60,700 homes in the northeast New Territories at a cost of $120 billion.
Under a special compensation scheme, affected households will be paid up to $600,000 to move out, but opposition is already building up. ATV's Emily Sue reports.
After 3 rounds of public consultation, during which it came across plenty of opposition, the government announced changes today to its original plans to develop the northeastern New Territories. The large swathes of farmland and villages in Ping Chi and Takuleng are safe from original plans to convert them into a new town, at least for now. Instead, officials are focusing on building 2 new towns in Fanling North and Kutong North. They say Ping Chi and Takuleng lack the necessary infrastructure and access to public transportation for residential development. The new proposal is to spend $120 billion to build 60,700 residential units in Fanling North and Kutong North. That's a 28% increase over the original plan to build 47,300 flats. By 2030, the 2 new towns will be able to take in a population of 174,900, 31% more than the original target of 134,000. The ratio between public and private housing will be 60-40. Originally, only 43% of the flats were to be subsidized housing. The first batch of subsidized homes should be ready by 2022 to 2023, but the entire project is expected to be completed by 2030. Development Secretary Paul Chan stressed how crucial these flats are to boosting the city's overall housing supply.
One must acknowledge this particular project is very important in terms of medium-term land supply for Hong Kong. And I do hope that we bear in mind the overall best interests of Hong Kong.
Authorities are ditching the tradition of taking back all the land and compensating those affected. Instead, this time private developers will be allowed to acquire some of the land so that construction can be sped up. Of the 330 hectares of land that will be converted for new town development, 70% will be handled by the government, while private developers will take over 30%. This means developers can build on about 48 hectares of land. And for landowners who are affected, a land swap scheme is being offered if they fulfill certain requirements. The land size must be at least 4,000 square meters and already earmarked for private development. The application must be submitted before a deadline set by the government, and the affected tenants or occupants must be compensated with an amount similar to that offered by the administration. As for the 70% of land that will be acquired by the government, a special compensation scheme will be set up. Licensed and registered house owners will get up to $600,000 each in compensation. Those without a license or registration are also entitled to compensation if they have lived in a house for more than 10 years. The government estimates up to 1,000 households in the area would be affected by the new town development. While activists and villagers are threatening to stage mass protests to protect their homes, the development chief urged them to prioritize the interests of all Hong Kong people, implying that their sacrifice is necessary to meet future housing demand.
But despite all the good efforts, we may not be able to satisfy each opponent. We will take a proactive approach to engage them, to go see them, to explain to them the rationale behind, and to listen to their concerns, to explain to them the possible remedial measures that we have in mind for them.
Chen also announced that some of the homes built in Fanling and Kutong North will be exclusively for local residents under the Hong Kong Property for Hong Kong People scheme, but gave no more details. Emily Sue, ATV News.
Villagers affected by the redevelopment plans are threatening to launch mass protests to protect their homes.
They're complaining that they were not properly consulted and plan to fight until the end. ATV's Arthur Kyola reports.
Northeastern New Territories villagers are already up in arms over the government's plans to build the new towns where they live. They're complaining that the government is bulldozing through its new town development plans without properly consulting them. Ms. Chung said her home in Kutung has been in her family for generations, and it's unreasonable for the government to force her to leave. She pointed out that there were options the government had not considered, such as building on land in the district currently being used for a golf course. Her home is one of the 1,000 in the area which will be demolished to make way for the project. Some of the affected villagers are threatening protests on the scale of those in 2010, when thousands of people surrounded the Legislative Council building to oppose the cross-border express rail. That $60 billion project went ahead regardless, displacing about 500 residents in Choi Yun Chun village, which the demonstrators were trying to save. This farmer from Ping Che village, which has been spared for now, says she is worried the government may change its mind at a later date and she could still lose her home. But some rural committees support the government's decision to shelve plans to redevelop Ping Che and Tak Hu Ling. Hao Chi Kung, chairman of Sheng Choi's rural committee, said he agrees with plans to focus on 2 new towns instead. However, he's calling for the government to carry out improvement works to infrastructure, provide more community facilities, and improve drainage works to better prevent flooding during rainstorms. Experts say the government's decision to allow private developers to build on some of the land as part of a public-private partnership will make development less bureaucratic.
The government would like to consider about a PPP so as to expedite, to make it faster in order to make the development faster, because the developers, they hold the lands, can start the development as soon as possible instead of asking the Legislative Council for the approval of funding and then acquisition of land.
But you warned that aside from increasing the ratio of public housing in the new plan, proper allocation is also important for the healthy development of these new towns. Arthur Akiola, ATV News.